120 seconds. 110 seconds. 100 seconds. 90 seconds. 80 seconds. 70 seconds. 60 seconds. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
'Hi,
my name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
All right, my friends, once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. The great Jay Hogarth in the background bringing us in. It's Morning Talk in studio 1A. We got none other than the one and only Jonathan Small.
Good morning, Stan.
Morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, and you?
I'm doing very well, my friend. Very well. How's your weekend?
Weekend was nice. I mean, nothing spectacular. Pretty much. Yesterday was pretty nice, quiet. I didn't even get a chance to look at any basketball, college basketball. I've been out of the loop for the whole year for college basketball, so getting close to March Madness. So I'll try to stay a little bit more focused going into the month of March. And April will be the NFL draft. Kind of looking forward to that. See which move the Dallas Cowboys and a few other teams are going to make. But otherwise, I guess it's the calm before the storm. A little storm, they saying, because it's going to happen this evening in Hartford, well, Connecticut, pretty much the area.
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll have a blizzard or something.
Yeah, 8 inches.
8 inches?
About that, yeah.
8? Are you serious?
Well, that sound like a lot to you?
It sounds more than what I was thinking. I didn't know there was 8 inches of snow in the forecast.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, maybe different parts of the state. I think the northwestern hills might be the higher, so that could be the 8 inches, the northwestern part of the state.
Oh no, I've been busy all weekend. This is the first time I actually try to listen to the weather, and I couldn't. I kept missing it. bottom and top of the hour. I missed it by like 3 minutes. The news broadcast.
Yeah. Well, just do it. Whatever particular errands that you have to do that's important, try to get it done today.
I will get it done today. Things like shopping for food.
Shopping for food. Make sure you have enough.
You don't want to
groceries.
starve to death in like 2 days. It's, snow comes.
Yeah.
If you don't have like everything you need in the house.
They probably haven't had the news forecasters haven't had anything to really talk about this winter for snow, so they probably eager to talk about the storm. But I don't think it's going to be that
Get
bad.
the rulers, go stand outside in the snow outside the station, talk about it's coming down.
Coming down, yeah. But your weekend was pretty fine?
I had a great weekend.
Did you ever get a chance to check out that pizza I was talking about, Wilson Pizza?
Wilson Pizza, I drove past there twice this weekend. Didn't even think about stopping.
So you're not even thinking about that pizza. Okay.
No, although I did have a conversation about Wilson Pizza with somebody, and apparently the guy who originally had Wilson Pizza moved.
Oh.
He moved. He's down in Rocky Hill.
Okay.
And so all the people that used to go to Wilson, from what I was told, now go to Rocky Hill to get their pizza because the original great taste of Wilson Pizza is still alive in Rocky Hill.
Look, I got to find out exactly where that location is at in Rocky Hill. So I want to try it and see if it. Although, like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, this one did taste it nice, this pizza. But I will want to check into this Rocky Hill pizza establishment.
I don't know if you want to do that, Jonathan. It's like they say, don't meet your heroes. Because when you meet them in real life, they're not heroes anymore. So don't do that. Just stay where you're at because you're happy. You like the pizza at Wilson. Don't, because you'll find out that the pizza at Wilson is really actually horrible.
Well, truthfully, that was the first time I went to Wilson in over 2 years, so it was
you have nothing to compare it to.
Compare it
and then
to.
you're gonna put it up against the original.
The original one is in Rocky Hill, from what you're telling me. The original owner.
Right.
Okay. But that's the thing about it. I want to see if his pizza tastes better. If I'm in the area, I'm not gonna go out of my way, but just want to find out which part of Rocky Hill is located at.
It might be worth a day trip, drive on down there. In fact, you know what? If you decide you want to go to Rocky Hill, let me know. I'll pick up the cost of the pizza.
Oh, I appreciate that. I can't turn down a free pizza. And then the next time it'll be my treat.
No. We don't say anything about getting a pizza. We get a couple slices.
Okay. Well, I'll bring my money to buy my own, and then I'll still take a sliced pizza. So I'll take both off.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, it is Monday morning when we do the program originally. And so those of you missing the live interaction, you can always tune in. 8 o'clock every morning, every evening. It's Morning Talk with myself and, of course, the champions of talk. And, of course, it being the beginning of the week, we always have a special guest. Great special guests join us from around the country, around the world, and sometimes even locally. And so today, like every other day, every other Monday, that is, we have another great guest coming to us who's taking time out of their busy schedule to share their wisdom and expertise. So get your pencils, paper. I always tell people to take notes because you're going to learn something that you didn't know.
Well, Stan and people out there this morning on Morning Talk Live with Jay Stan McCauley Talk Show. We have a returning guest to Morning Talk Live with Jay Stan McCauley Talk Show. And as Stan mentioned, we classify every guest every week as a special guest, but this guest definitely defines the terminology of a special guest status because her background and her career really stands out in many different critical areas. The guest this morning has run a city for 8 years as a mayor. She has a lot of civic, political, historical experience, a lot to bring to the table. This morning on Morning Talk Live with Jay Stan McCauley Talk Show, we have the guest, no other than the Honorable former Mayor of Atlanta, Mayor Shirley Franklin. Good morning, Mayor. How are you doing?
Good morning. And it's expected to be 75 degrees here today in Atlanta. So
Yes.
we're watching the rest of the world. We know that it's even in Atlanta, that's a pretty warm temperature for February.
Summertime, it feels like, I would imagine down there, 75.
It's definitely spring.
Spring,
Uh,
okay.
but we really should be having colder weather. And those of us who are gardeners are a little worried because we need the cold weather to kill off some of the insects that eat up all of our fruits and vegetables and in the summertime. So we'll
Hmm.
see. But
Yeah.
we're crossing our fingers that everyone else is safe if there's a bad storm.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mayor Franklin. Um, Mayor Franklin, could you kind of let people know again briefly a little bit about yourself and background before we get into our topics of discussion?
Sure. I am Shirley Franklin. I was born in Philadelphia, educated in public schools in Philadelphia, and then at Howard, went to Howard University and studied sociology, anthropology, and African studies in the early 1960s. Went back to Philadelphia and got a master's degree in sociology, and then was intrigued by the work of some young civil rights leaders that I knew at Howard, who were founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I was intrigued to move south to teach at Talladega College in 1970 and taught there for 2 years. Talladega is one of the oldest historically Black colleges. It's in Alabama. I was there before the Talladega 500. And so the county is small. So I went from a big city to a county of 15,000 and got a little better taste of what people in small towns, how they live and what their culture is. And ultimately moved to Atlanta in 1972 and have been here ever since. So in 1972, just to refresh your memory, is the year that Andrew Young ran for Congress and won as the first Black since Reconstruction from the South. Andrew Young was a congressman for 3 terms and then ultimately was appointed UN ambassador by President Carter. And the next year, Maynard Jackson ran for mayor, and at 36 years old became the first African American mayor of a major southern city. And he served for 2 terms. And I worked in both of those campaigns, obviously much younger and much, much less experienced. And then ultimately went into city government and started working for Maynard Jackson as the director of cultural affairs. He wanted to promote municipal arts within city government. And I was one of the early directors of the Office of Cultural Affairs. And then when Andrew Young ran, I was the deputy campaign manager for his mayoral campaign 8 years after Maynard was in office. And then went in as the chief administrative officer of the city of Atlanta, which at the time was the highest ranking appointed position. And frankly, in those days, at least in the South, one of the few women who had a high level administrative job like that. Not the only woman, but one of the few. So I have 21 years of government experience, starting with cultural affairs and then chief administrative officer, chief operating officer. And then of those 21 years, 8 years as mayor of the city from 2002 to 2010. When my term was up, we have term limits, 2 consecutive terms. So I've been retired from city governments since 2010. But once you are intimately involved in any aspect of your career, you kind of follow it closely. So I'm excited about what's going on in Atlanta now with our new mayor, Andre
Mm.
Dickon.
Okay, those words are well taken. And obviously, Mayor Franklin, you definitely know the city, the history, the present, the future, which is going to be the main topics this morning on the show to really give a good outline. And for some people who don't realize, the history of Atlanta played a critical role as far back as the Civil War. And it was so instrumental of the geographical location of the city of Atlanta that still consists today But in your opinion and expertise, how important is the history of Atlanta towards the national country as a whole, towards saying Atlanta played a role in shaping some areas of our country towards the way it consists of today?
Well, I mean, thank you for that introduction. Though I did not study Georgia history and Atlanta history when I was a child, uh, certainly as mayor and working for two really great mayors, I had a chance to learn a lot about it. So Atlanta in the 1890, so Atlanta was founded in the late 1830s. In the 1890s, Atlanta had eight colleges and universities. Five of them are historically Black universities, and four of them, which are still fully operating. And many people know Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta University, Interdenominational Theological Center, as well as Morris Brown, which has just achieved its accreditation again. But those colleges and universities attracted people from all over the South, who were interested in their next generation, not just being educated, but being independent and being social change agents themselves. So there's this long history of higher education in the city. Then you combine that with the early history of Atlanta as a railroad center. There were 11 railroads going through Atlanta. And Atlanta was across a north, south, east, west intersection for railroads. And so I think the two of those factors heavily influenced how Atlanta grew, who was attracted to Atlanta, and continued to influence the city. So those are it was the railroads and the movement of goods and services that resulted in the burning of Atlanta during the Civil War in order to cut off the connection that the Confederacy had to the goods that they needed. And even though Atlanta is one of the few cities in the world that's actually been burned to the ground and rebuilt, there are very few buildings in Atlanta that existed prior to the Civil War because of the burning of Atlanta. But Atlanta decided in the 1890s, so this is 30 years after the Civil War, the business leaders, Black and white, frankly, Booker T. Washington was involved, Henry Grady, who was the publisher of the newspaper at the time, and others decided to hold what's called the Cotton Stakes Exposition. And that exposition was an opportunity for Atlanta to declare itself the crown jewel of the South. It declared that it wanted to be the cultural, economic, business, and education center of the entire South. Now, that was a big boast at the time, and I wouldn't say that other cities are not equally important, but Atlanta, from a very early period in its history, strived to be one of the great cities of the United States and the world. And that kind of drive has continued into the 21st century with the introduction of the film industry, the music industry in Atlanta in the last 20 years. Some of it started with Maynard Jackson, but it really has intensified and grown in the last 20 years. With logistics now having what we believe is the world's busiest airport, some 90 million passengers last year. The most we've ever had before the pandemic was about 110 million passengers. Remember now, we're not a port city. So the airport, the railroads became the entry point and to the city. And now major investment from the technology industries, which is the 21st century logistics industry. So we are really positioned to continue to grow we've helped to diversify the economy of the state, which until very recently was largely agricultural. But Atlanta and, of course, the surrounding areas, metropolitan Atlanta, have really diversified the population of the state. And I just close with this other factor. When I moved to Atlanta in 1972, there were less than 1 million people in the metropolitan area and just about 4 million people in the state of Georgia. In 2021 and 2022, we are now seeing close to 6 million people in the metropolitan area and over 10 million people in the state. So the investment in infrastructure, airlines, railroads, roads, now technology, higher education, healthcare, hospitality, all of those industries have made a huge difference in the success of the state of Georgia.
Well, Mayor Franklin, you stated one thing early during your presentation, that Atlanta kind of put itself on a status level of being the jewel of the South. And recently, over the past 20 to 30 years, it goes by the nickname, let's say, the King of the South. But you're saying that there was some planning and some strategic structures to kind of make Atlanta stand out as the jewel city of the South. And this is comparison to other major cities that you have in the South as well. Did people always look at Atlanta as far back as the 1800s as really the jewel of the South?
Well, in early 1800s and 1830s and 1840s, Atlanta described itself as a kind of a small town with dusty roads and, not particularly attractive.
Mm.
What changed, however, is this push for industry and development. And I actually think it goes back to the railroads, because something happens with a railroad. People get on and they get off. And when you have as many railroads coming and converging in a community, you are bringing people from all over, in those days, all over the country, certainly from the Northeast. And they're bringing their culture, their hopes and dreams and aspirations. Combined with that, several of the colleges were actually founded. There were philanthropists after the Civil War who were looking for a place to invest in higher education. And several of them chose Atlanta because of this infrastructure and because it had this culture of hospitality and rail and road infrastructure. So everything since then has really been built on that foundation, in my opinion. I'm not a historian. I'm a public servant practitioner. But I think if you look, when you get off the railroad, you need a place to stay. So that's the hospitality industry grew. The more people who come, there were about 90,000 people in Atlanta in the 1890s. So 40% of them were African American. So shortly after that, at the beginning of the 20th century, Atlanta became a place that people wanted to come, even if they were second generation immigrants. So you have the combination of the strong African American population, W.E.B. Du Bois, who was in Atlanta teaching at Atlanta University Center, Booker T. Washington, who, though in Alabama, was intimately involved in some aspects of Atlanta, and then very ambitious white business people, along with Black entrepreneurs who were building what they thought would be an opportunity for themselves and for others to grow the economy. Mm. So, it's been a dynamic city for a long time. I think when we hosted the Olympics in 1996, which was 100 years after the Cotton States Exposition, Um, it was pretty interesting because those of us who worked on the Olympic Committee used to say that the world was going to come to Atlanta after the games. I don't think any of us anticipated how much of the world would come and how fast it would grow.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, Mayor Franklin, Atlanta has survived many different obstacles. I mean, just the fact that the city was literally burnt down to the ground and it was able to rebuild and go from that point on. I can't think of too many places that could say that. And that really was a historical moment in the city, having the city literally burnt down to the ground. I guess that was a long time ago, and certainly with technology and infrastructure, you could still recover. But even over the past, let's say 40 to 50 years, when Atlanta was experiencing the Atlanta child murders, it drew a national spotlight on the fact that, is this city really all what it's cracked up to be? I mean, you're having a scenario where mostly black children are being killed by somebody who, people don't know exactly who this person is and why this person doing this. But what was it like during that period of time to know that you have some type of serial killer that's targeting black children, and at some point it's just going from 1 to 10 to 20? How did Atlanta deal with that, and how did Atlanta overcome that from not having its reputation being tarnished, in your opinion?
Well, the missing and murdered children was a very serious period in Atlanta's history. Maynard Jackson was mayor. It weighed on him very heavily. There have been some films and a few writings, but mostly a recent film about the missing and murdered children. There was a conviction. There is controversy as to whether the conviction covers all of the murders. They were both children and young adults who were killed. And it really gripped the city in a way that I had not seen and have not seen since. The fear, the disappointment, the sadness really gripped the city during that. And it took a lot of encouragement, both from the faith community as well as civic leaders and political leaders. Maynard was an extraordinarily popular mayor in American history, frankly. But he was a young man, and he was committed to the African American community from the very beginning. So to a certain extent, the love of Maynard and the confidence in Maynard actually helped to carry the city through. But it was not without its sadness and disappointment. And though I was not in city government at the time, just as an observer and someone who's been politically and civically active, I can tell you it was the topic of every conversation every day. What could we do to avoid that? And this will seem like a small thing, but at the time it was a big thing. City of Atlanta operated summer programs for a few hundred children when the missing and murdered children series of murders occurred. And Maynard announced that we were going to have open and free summer programs so that children would have a safe place to be when their parents were working during the summer and school was out. And he launched a program called Camp Best Friends that continues to this day, where children could go to a safe place during the summer to be sure that they were safe. It still serves primarily young people, youth under the ages of 13, although there are some programs for teenagers, but most of the programs for teenagers are internships and summer jobs. But it was a big shift in the way the city actually addressed it, saying that it had an obligation to provide services for young people. I don't think we'll ever forget, those of us who lived through it, especially the young people who were children at the time. I don't think we will ever forget the horror and the terror and the sadness that we felt during that period.
Well, Stan, let me bring you into this because I guess the comparison we've had in Connecticut might be the Sandy Hook incident when the person went into the school and shot up, I believe, 20 children along with some administrators. And although that was recently, within the last 10 years, do you know a little bit about this Atlanta child murders to kind of realize, even though you weren't living in Georgia, the type of impact it was, putting on the country? Do you kind of remember a little bit about that in time span?
I don't remember enough about it to speak intelligently on the subject.
Okay.
I think, the difference would be that Atlanta as a city, as a municipality, as a very tight-knit community, if you're going to make the comparison between Atlanta and Sandy Hook,
yeah, I
think you might make a better analogy than Sandy Hook. I mean, relative to Connecticut.
Okay.
Sandy Hook I think it's a little bit different because it dealt with a mass shooting of children. In the national impact that had, and the whole gun legislation. So I think this was Atlanta is something very near and dear to most every human being, is the fact of their children. And what as I'm listening to the mayor, how the city made it a priority that these are our kids, and the manifestation of these programs that dealt with the attitude of these being our kids, to me is very, very significant, because it puts the children first as a policy, and there's meat on the bones. It's not just talk. And there's a rationale and a rhyme and a reason for where these programs started. And a lot of cities do these things, but it's not necessarily because kids are coming first and there's a real heart for kids. It's always some other political policy. And so I think that's, to me, from what that's my takeaway.
Any other further questions you want to ask Mayor Franklin while we on?
No, I'm always in listening mode.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm listening, and the fact that there's a mayoral election in our city right now. Yeah, I hope other folk are listening.
Okay.
We had our election a year ago, so we 7th African American mayor. We are a city that was not quite 50%. African American in terms of registered voters when Maynard won in 1973. And we are now a city of about 50-50 in terms of population. So African American political leadership in the city, and actually in the metropolitan area, is quite strong. If you look at our county system, around our counties, we have 7 African American county chairs. And this is the first time ever, 4 of them African American women. And for our largest counties, we have African Americans in the top political slots. Many of them county chairs and sheriffs. So there's a new era in Georgia, especially in the metropolitan area. And I think, Jonathan, to take it back to Atlanta, the leadership of the political leadership, certainly going back to Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson, has been that African Americans have risen to political leadership in positions that were unexpected 40 or 50 years ago by many, but not by the 2 of them.
I do actually have a question, Jonathan.
Oh, you do?
Okay. Yeah, I want to talk to Madam Mayor about. Here in Hartford, and we had Thurman Milner and we had Carrie Saxon Perry. This was some time ago, and after that it was done. Hasn't been a black mayor or any significant black leadership since then. So the thing I wanted to ask you about was the bench, developing the developing black political leadership and the intentionality around that. If you could speak a little bit to that, because I know that, as you were saying, you were deputy campaign manager, then you worked in this. You can see, at least I can, you can see how there's a, the right people are groomed for the job. People, they talent spot or see the potential in someone. They bring them in and they groom them. It's not, it's just a different mindset to setting up tomorrow's leaders. If you could speak to that a little bit, because in Hartford it's just lacking. It just doesn't exist.
Well, I mean Atlanta is, and southern cities. I mean, there are many people who remember Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
They remember the fight for civil rights and voting rights. So the intentionality grows out of the struggle that many people who are still alive either led or participated in. So it is an emotional attachment to political leadership that reveals itself in a lot of different ways. When I think about the mayors that we've had, Maynard Jackson's father and grandfather were tremendous civic leaders in Atlanta before Maynard was born. So it was not by accident that he or someone like him would come along. Andrew Young, same thing. Andrew Young came to Atlanta to work with Dr. Martin Luther King. So in addition to what his family influences, there was this direct influence of the civil rights movement. Bill Campbell was one of the children in his community who actually integrated the schools in North Carolina. So his father and grandparents were instrumental in political change. So you could go just down the list and see that while the track or the path to political leadership hasn't been the same for all of us, you can see the direct relationship between kind of a social activist environment that allows Black leadership to come forward. I mean, this last election, I've forgotten whether it was 7 or 8 candidates. So we don't have any shortage of Black and white now political leadership seeking to lead the city or the counties. But it is intentional, and it is intentional in the way that everyone is exposed to it who's interested. And many people like Maynard and Andy in particular, and Bill Campbell, I mean, their influence was very early in their lives. The influence in my life was early, but mine came largely from church in Philadelphia, and then from Howard University. So I think, there are times when we have conversations about whether this person or that person is going to be the last Black mayor of Atlanta. And that was projected for me, that the last Black mayor of Atlanta. And now we're on our 3rd Black mayor after me. So that hypothesis that because the population is integrated and is now 50-50 white and Black, or Hispanic, is not as much Hispanic in Latino in the city itself, or Asian, but there is a large influence of people from different backgrounds. Black political leadership does very well in a diverse environment, diverse population and voting environment in Atlanta so far. And I think it will continue to do that. And some of it is because we've had this exposure. So, I mean, our current mayor, Andre Dickens, I met him when he was a high school student. He played high school in the same neighborhood where I live, on the same team with my son. So even though he was not necessarily in a political family, he was in an environment where there were political leaders. Andrew Young lives nearby. I live here. The exposure to political leaders early in your life is not very unusual in Atlanta.
Mayor Franklin, you said one thing that, and I kind of want to address this, whether it's a fair question or accusation or not, just kind of want to figure it out, because when people throughout the country, whether it's a myth or reality, Atlanta is looked at as kind of two different types of cities. You have a city where you have so many successful entrepreneurs, that's black, businesses, world-class airport, movers and shakers, international trade. You run just about all forms of governments, particularly black people in the city, from the airport to city government. But at the same token, if you go to Atlanta in the city limits, you'll see a high homeless population. You have a high crime rate. You have all types of drug trafficking that goes through that city. And it's like, it's a wonder, how can you have a city with so much success, prosperity, historical levels of a track record, but yet these other factors you can't seem to really put a dent in, or, and I don't want to say eradicate, because that's kind of wouldn't be fair to say one city should be able to eradicate. But why is the benefits not really trickling down all the way towards the bottom, in your opinion?
Oh, well, we could have a whole week's conversation about that. Remember, I told you I have a sociology background and anthropology. Let's just let me give you my kind of top line thoughts about that.
Okay.
Number one, Atlanta and the South have been digging out of a hole. And that hole was slavery and manifestations of slavery, convict labor after that, not just slavery, then laws that were put in place, as you recall, in the emancipation, in the 13th Amendment, I think it is, that if in fact you were a criminal, you didn't have rights. Remember all of that history? Well, what they did in the South, and Atlanta is no exception, but certainly in Atlanta, is they started arresting people for minor crimes and had a whole period of convict labor that was essentially slavery again, where people were picked up off the street, literally thousands of people. And surprisingly enough, one of the businesses that benefited from that in Atlanta was the business owned by the mayor at the time. So let me just put that, I want that to sink in for a minute. So the Chattahoochee Brick Company, and the history was a former mayor. So this was a civic leader who was using the law to benefit personally by arresting largely black men to work off debt for minor crimes. So, if you just see what the obstacles as slavery and no slavery, you don't really understand that the history is much more complex than that. I mean, it's slavery and Jim Crow and convict labor and voter suppression. So it's not as if all the obstacles have been removed. That's number one. And we could spend a lot of time on that. There's been a lot written about that recently. And the city is beginning to grapple with just the notion of the complexities that Black community has had to face, these obstacles, and some of the ways that we've overcome it. So that's one. Number two, we are a very fast growing metropolitan area. Atlanta is the city itself is less than 10% of the region. But yet we own and operate some of the most important infrastructure, the airport, the water and sewer. We're the center of the road system, et cetera. So we attract people from all over the region. So while it's true that many Atlantans are doing well, it is also true that we attract we attract the problems for the whole region,
Mm-hmm.
not
Okay.
just our own problems. Just think about that. We're 500,000. The region is over 6 million, but much of the business and the economy is geared around the hotel industry, the airport, and now this investment in technology. So we attract people from all over. The airport had and the road system have an upside, which we always talk about, which is the hundreds of millions of dollars of economic benefit to the state and to the city. But it also has a downside. So we have to work really hard to be sure that we don't have human trafficking in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving through 250,000 people a day. I mean, not all of them are going to be people of goodwill and good conscience. So, I mean, there's this huge concern about that. I'll just tell you a quick story. I was in an airport, not in Atlanta, and a woman and a man got into a fight while I was standing in the in line, and I stepped over and broke up the fight. They didn't know who I was. I wasn't in Atlanta. But the point of the matter was that, the woman said to me, "Well, he's just a jerk." And I looked around the airport and it was packed with people. I said, "There are a lot of jerks in here. This is not one jerk. There's a lot of them, and we can't fight them all. So maybe we should just take a deep breath and walk away from the fight." And she fell out laughing because there's more than one jerk in the airport. There's more than one jerk coming to Atlanta.
Right.
Now, on the poverty issue, and I'll be quick on this, on the issue of poverty, and homelessness is an expression. In Georgia, we have the worst mental health care system in the state, in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Got some great things. The state does not enforce the mental health requirements under the federal law. It is consistently out of compliance and underfunded. So some of it is mental health. Some of it is access to jobs. A lot of the jobs are in the metro area and you can't get to them. And some of it is wage rates. We are a right to work state. And by that, what that means is that there are some wages that are just depressed. And those wages are largely in the lower paying jobs. So when you're not making enough money, your city is growing fast. The cost of living is going up very fast. And you are still stuck at under $10 an hour. Or even at $15 an hour in a fast growing economy, you are going to fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
So Atlanta has a long way to go, and Georgia has a long way to go to put human rights issues at the top. Are we better than we were? Absolutely. Are we as good as we need to be? Absolutely, we are not. So that is the struggle. And some people say, Maynard used to say, one of his favorite speeches was, "We are a tale of two cities, the haves and the have-nots."
Mm-hmm.
Still struggle with that.
Well, one thing, I mean, if you look at Atlanta, I don't know if you think this would be a solution or it would just be another problem. But let's say you have other cities in the South like Nashville who consolidated their form of city government to actually make the city much larger in land space. I believe Jacksonville, Florida did the same thing. Would you like to see Atlanta, instead of having so many surrounding towns, form their own city like Sandy Springs and other cities? Would you like to see Atlanta just become one big regional city? And do you think that would go towards solving some of the problems if the whole area of Metro Atlanta or a large section of Metro Atlanta was just formed as one city of Atlanta?
Jonathan, you have hit it. I came out for that when I was mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was shouted down by people from all over, from Black people, white people, business people, civic leaders. People did not want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is tribalism and territorial preferences. We have moved in the opposite direction. When I was mayor, we had fewer cities than we have now in the metro area.
Mm-hmm.
We're now less connected in terms of government. Just imagine what we could save. But the bigger problem, the fundamental problems, are investment in education, healthcare. We are one of the states that has not expanded Medicaid. We have not expanded. We are not a part of Obamacare in any big way. We have at least 500,000 people who are not covered by any insurance. We have low wages, especially for unskilled workers, but even semi-skilled workers or somewhat skilled workers. Our transportation system does not serve people who have limited income because our rail system and our bus system does not go to all of the jobs that are available. So we are an auto dependent region. And these are some of the fundamental problems that affect people with low incomes the most. I can choose to drive, to call my neighbor, to take some kind of ride share, and I have a bus that right down the street.
Mm.
But I live in a place where I can do all of those things, and in 21st century Atlanta, I can also work electronically online, right? But you can't do every job that way.
Right.
You can't do every job that way. So I am often asked what I'm most proud of when I was in office. And I often answer by talking about what I think I didn't do enough. And that issue is I did not do enough to address the issues of poverty. I did some things, but I should have done more.
Well, let me give you one example, and I can also bring you into this as well, Stan. You said the low wages of Georgia being a right to work state. And I know you was real instrumental and you had a lot to do with the Clean Water Project or whatever name that it was classified in Atlanta during your administration. Here in Connecticut, we are a heavily unionized state. So you take our water and sewer agency, you can have a sewer maintainer or a water maintainer making about $30 an hour. You could take the same type of job in Georgia, the same type of worker in Georgia, and that worker is making half the rate, just the fact that it's a right to work state. So people would say, the low cost of living to some degree, the low cost of doing business in Georgia and other right to work states can kind of outweigh the fact that you have low wages. But I just don't see it that way. I can't see how you can compare a worker doing the same type of work. And it's not just I'm just using the sewer and water industry as one example. You can have nurses basically in the unionized states making double of what a nurse can make in Georgia. So it seems like it's some legislative policies that's going to have to be looked at. And I think you're going to get a lot of resistance. Although people will tell you Georgia is changing, it could be a blue state. The Democrats is taking a foothold, but it still hasn't really changed the whole income and policy structures that Georgia have. Just the fact that you are a right to work state and you have low wages, you have a minimum wage that's much lower than the northern states here in Connecticut. So I think you kind of gave me an answer towards why you have two cities in Atlanta. Pretty much. I just wanted to give you some type of other feedback on why I think your problems are still going to continue to be a problem.
I don't think there's any question about that.
Mm-hmm.
And we meaning the state, not necessarily me, brag about how this is a good state, maybe even one of the best states to do business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of that is based on depressed wages and weak weak investment in the human development side, the human service side of government. low taxes, low state taxes, designed to supposedly support families, when in fact, families are suffering because the tax rates are too low in some cases. And that's not a very popular position among Democrats or Republicans. So we are a state that is changing. We have been a Democratic state. We've been a Republican state now, but we were a conservative Democrat state, a Dixiecrat state, a blue dog. We were not viewed as progressive even when we were all Democrats. So now we are. Some people say we're a divided state. The fact of the matter is, we elected 2 Democrats to the U.S. Senate, which was astounding, amazing, and wonderful from my perspective. And one is African American and one is Jewish, and no one would have ever put any money on either one of them getting elected 15 years ago. So, and the state went for Biden this last time. So we have not, the state did not vote, the voters did not vote for a Democrat going back to Jimmy Carter. So that's a long way.
Stan,
go
ahead.
So I was just going to say, I mean, we are a state in a state of change. I, like you, am very hopeful that change will benefit most people, most working people, as opposed to just a few. But that is part of our struggle.
Stan, you had anything you wanted to ask Mayor Franklin?
No, I'm considering an awful lot. I'm listening to what what the mayor is saying, and
see, Stan and Mayor Franklin, I don't think anybody can dispute the success that Atlanta consists of. You have the movie, film industries. You have so many black-owned businesses. I think you're ranked first or in the top 2 or 3 in the country. And it looks like to me, on paper, it's a good place to move to and invest to if you're connected, if you have the right industry, right skill set. But I don't look at it as a good city or even a good state to live or move to if you're poor, if you're looking for assistance. I mean, I don't think anybody likes to be poor.
You can almost say that about any place.
Well, but I think Connecticut, when we have more sympathy. I think I've had a relative who had multiple sclerosis, MS. And he was telling me and other family members, they just tell him, we're not going to be able to help you. We can't do anything for you. And he had to actually move back up here to Connecticut because he just couldn't get the services that he needed down in Georgia. I think it's how they talk to you if you're poor and at the bottom. I think you may say it doesn't make a difference, or we all are. You can say we all have the same problems anywhere we go, but if somebody's telling you right in your face, we can't do anything for you right now. You got to wait maybe another whole year. That kind of defeats you a little bit when you're looking for help.
I think that there's more involved in that than meets the surface. And there is an element of politics involved and things along that line. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean to say, now, if Georgia opens up his doors and say, "Oh, no matter what you have, come on down here and we'll be here," everyone will flood the state.
Right.
So there's a moratorium or a waiting period. We will give help to those who we have a primary responsibility to. We're not a safe haven for everyone who has a problem. Now, you suggest that perhaps Connecticut may be that place. Then look at the problems we have here too.
Right.
So if you have people who are leaving the state because they see a drain and the doors are open for everybody, then the folks who are actually here and need the services, who have over time contributed, have grown up here, become pushed to the side by the needs of folks who just here for what they can get. Not someone who's slipping beneath the cracks. So there are a lot of these kinds of policies that are discussed at certain levels of government that I think you're not including in your, in your analysis. And so it may not simply be that, well, they're mean down there, and there are different philosophical approaches to how you help people.
Right.
Do you inspire someone or do you motivate someone? You motivate them, and then as soon as the motivator leaves, they're sitting around figuring out, what do I do next? If you inspire someone, they are inspired for change. The old adage of, do you teach a man to fish or do you provide him with a plate of food? And there's there's two very legitimate arguments there. But at some point, the best thing to do is to be self-sufficient and independent. And what is the best way to help a person get there? Not just tell them, well, lift yourself up by your own. Saying that means nothing. How are you going to empower someone to be able to do that?
Well, before I turn this back over to Mayor Franklin, I just want to say I agree with what you're saying. You do want to inspire people and motivate people. But I just want to also say, when you have a health issue and you got medical issues through no fault of your own to some degree, you would like to believe in America we are for our more. I'm not talking about somebody that's physically and mentally able to do something and he just can't get something for nothing. I'm talking about someone that has multiple sclerosis, a real serious health issue, and whoever is telling him down in Georgia that we just can't do nothing for you right now.
Right, but let's not get lost in the weeds here and stuff. I would simply suggest, if I heard you correctly, he's not from Georgia.
No, he's from Connecticut and he moved to Georgia.
Right, so it's not like they're just the cold shoulder. He can get help here.
Right.
He had help here. He wants to go down there. They're not going to give him help off the rip. He has to wait a year.
No. He was originally from Connecticut. He had moved to Georgia. He was spending enough years in Georgia to be classified as a Georgia resident. He had some health issues that came along the way, and he was not able to get the type of medical treatment consistently or whatever the case may be that he needed. So he had to come back to Connecticut after living in Georgia for a period of time. So he didn't come from Connecticut sick and moved to Georgia looking for help.
All right.
Okay. But Mayor Franklin, what's your take on the attitudes on how Georgia and Atlanta looks at people at the bottom or people that need help that, pretty much is trying to struggle to get to the next level?
Well, a couple other points. I mean, I'm thinking about the conversation you just had. Atlanta is the worst place in terms of economic mobility. Your ability to move from one, can you see me? From one economic position, the lowest to the highest is harder in Atlanta than in any other major city in the country. So that is a fact. And it's very much tied to the history of the state of underinvestment in education, healthcare, economic development in the Black community, et cetera. Now, all the things you say that are good about Atlanta are in spite of that. In other words, they are in spite of that. They are an expression of the human will, political power, and social dynamics that mean that other good things happen. But there are some structural changes that need to take place. And I would not argue with that at all. We are under-resourced in healthcare. We do have some good hospitals, but given the size of our population, the diversity of the region, we are under-resourced when it comes to trauma one centers. We are under-resourced when it comes to healthcare access and affordability. And our hospitals are complaining about it every single day. If you ask them today, they would tell you that they are under-resourced. Too little state money, too little county money, not enough resources to serve all the needs of the people who walk through their doors. So I am not one to paint just a pretty picture. I think we have to see that we have challenges and we need to put our ourselves in a position to overcome those challenges. Now, mayors can do some things, but mayors can't do everything. U.S. senators can do some things, but they can't do everything. Um, we have one senator, Senator Ossoff, who's recently called for hearings on the Georgia foster care system because of the many ways that it is not serving children well. But those are U.S. Senate hearings on what's going on in Georgia by a Georgia senator. In fact, had he not been elected, chances are we wouldn't even be discussing the issue in terms of policy change. So you and Stan are absolutely correct. There's always two sides, maybe even four sides to every issue. But we've made some strides, but we got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of really what I want to get into toward the future of the city of Atlanta. I mean, obviously, it's still attractive. People are still looking at it as, and I guess it is the Black Mecca. I don't want to, again, take anything away from that. And I don't want to discourage anybody. That's why I'm bringing you as an expert, someone that knows the city firsthand, someone that knows the state of Georgia firsthand. And sometimes people who are moving down there, they're not going to be told what you just was telling people about the medical issues, other health related issues. They're going to tell you all of the good things that you want to hear, but they don't really want to tell you everything that you probably need to know. And I think that's real important because I'm pretty sure there's been people who have moved down to Atlanta with this illusion that everything pretty much is going to be easy to get your foot in the door, to get this, to get that. And I'm pretty sure they had some type of rude awakening when they got there to realize that the cost of housing in Atlanta is not that cheap as what people may have you to believe. It's very expensive the closer you get into the city. And if you're not making a certain amount of money, you'll find yourself very quickly either homeless or living in some type of substandard housing that's not that appealing and even livable. So the illusion factor of the future, Atlanta does an excellent job at painting this good picture of prosperity and success. And it's not the only city in the United States that's doing this, but I think people do need to be careful when you're looking at this city. And I'm glad that you are here to really give both sides of the spectrum of what Atlanta really consists of.
Well, I would say to you, Atlanta has a strong and growing middle class. There is no question about it. And we started this conversation talking about the early investment in higher education. Okay. So we do have a strong and growing middle class. We have a large number of Black businesses, African American owned business regionally and in the city itself. And we probably are number one or number two in the number of Black businesses, depending on who's counting. The impact, I worked for Andrew Young, and he is a wonderful salesperson for Atlanta, and he can tell you from his experience that Atlanta has more pluses than minuses. I agree with that. What I say, however, is we need to work. We can't be blinded by our success, and we have to continue to work to improve education, healthcare, housing costs. Housing costs have risen a great deal in the last decade. The rental costs in the city, one bedroom studios at almost $2,000 a month, which is ridiculously high. Property values in every part of the city going up, in large part because people don't want to travel the long distances that they've used to travel with suburban life. So there are some challenges, but there are also tremendous opportunities. There are tremendous opportunities. There are institutions and organizations and networks that can help you build your business, build your family relationships, your community relationships that are historic. I mean, you have many of the organizations that were a part of the civil rights movement that have strong evidence in Atlanta. You have colleges, over 30 colleges and universities in the metro area. So if you want to come and study something, I mean, I met the dean of the School of Education at Kennesaw State, which is 35 miles from where I live, 35 miles. He's an African American, one of the largest public schools, public universities in the state of Georgia. It is diverse. The same night, I met the associate or assistant provost of Savannah State, which is 4 hours from here, another state institution, an African American woman. So there are people who there are jobs. Coming prepared, continuing to learn. We have not talked about that. The world is moving so fast. You have to continue to learn. Whatever you know today is not going to be enough tomorrow. So you have to continue to learn. And there are lots of learning opportunities in Georgia, but you have to be very, very intentional about how you work and where you work, how you network, and what you want. Because if you just come with a big kind of dream with no parameters around it and no plan of action, Atlanta's like any other big metropolitan area. You get sucked in, you'll get sucked up. You have to have a plan of action. Your dream has to be with a plan. The plan is as important as the dream. And then you have to execute the plan. And a lot of young people are doing that. But there are some who are not. You talked about the crime rate and the fact that you can't do anything. It's very hard. I haven't been in office since 2010. But when I came into office, the city was the first or second highest homicide rate in the country on a per capita basis. We cut that in half in 8 years. So we went from 150 homicides to 80 in my last year in office. Now, unfortunately, that number is up to 160 last year. And I'm not sure what strategies they're using. I know it's hard to do, but it is possible to reduce the car thefts, the assaults, and the homicide rates. But you have to have a plan and you have to execute the plan.
Mayor Shirley Franklin, towards this last segment, I'll give you an A+ for your presentation this morning. You topped the last presentation when you was on in 2021. I didn't think that was possible. So you did an excellent job this morning. I appreciate having you on, particularly close to the last day of Black History Month as well. And I think Stan would have to agree. You gave an excellent presentation this morning again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sad that just only the introduction to the class, which is 4 years long.
Yeah, do that. So
you're very kind. You got me started by all that good music.
Okay, I got you going.
Yeah, Jay Hogard. He's a phenomenal musician, and I don't want to put any of his business in the street, but close relations and ties to Mayor Dinkins.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he's a top-notch musician. He's head of the music department at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. Yeah,
it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I felt like I was in another space.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I'm getting used to it too. That theme song, the new theme song that you have. I'm just starting to get used to it by now. Well, Mayor Franklin, as we end this segment, if there's anything briefly that you want to leave before we end the show, the mic and video is yours.
Well, I would say the one thing that I think that we can all do is recognize that our investment in children is the surest way to have success long-term in our community. So I would ask everyone who is listening or watching to find just one more way to help a child in the neighborhood, a child in the church or the mosque or just in the community center. Every child we touch in a positive way is good for our community, but is also good for America.
Words well taken. Definitely agree 100% with that assessment and everything.
All right, Madam Mayor, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule. Look forward to talking to you again soon. You stay blessed and encouraged, and keep being a source of inspiration and light.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
All right, my friends, we'll take a short break, listen to a little Jay Hogarth, and we'll be right back. Morning Talk, stick and stay. It's Morning Talk, stick and stay. We'll be right back.
How do you define evil? Is it the pedophile school administrator or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they are fighting for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for constituents to flip the script and leave the plantation of party politics and free your political mind.
name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back. Morning Talk. J.C. McCauley here, along with the champions of talk. Today's talk champion, Jonathan Small, in the house.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, that theme music is I'm getting used to it now. I was so in love with the other one.
Yeah.
It took me a while to really get into this one.
Yeah.
Now.
This one though is slamming right here.
Slamming, yeah. A unique sound to it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's definitely starting to get to me now. I'm starting to like this theme. So hopefully you'll keep this theme for a while.
Oh yeah. This theme's not going anywhere.
Not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. You know, it's a long shot. I know I told you last year I was working on trying to get someone that was involved with the Michael Jackson Thriller album. And
Trying to get the Q up in here?
well, anybody. I mean, that's a long. I mean, trying to get the Q would be the ultimate because he produced the album. But there were several people that played a role. But you know, also Lionel Richie, he had a very successful album. I think it's Can't Slow Down that came out in 1983 as well. What's your take on Lionel Richie as an artist? I was just wondering. You think he's one of the
he's
top?
a brilliant artist, no doubt about that. I think he has some Hartford connection too.
He does?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
I don't. You know, I don't want to say I was never a Lionel Richie fan, but it. You know. My leaning's more toward what you're hearing now, jazz and
Right. But Michael Jackson, now that stands out. Obviously, what he was like.
yes, Michael Jackson.
Okay.
Huge Michael Jackson fan.
But Lionel Richie may have a better singing voice. If you really listen to his voice, I think he has a better natural voice. He has one of the great voices. He's not an entertainer like Michael Jackson.
Right.
The showmanship and everything on stage. And he hasn't really put out anything new in a long time as well. But I just think in that era when he was with the Commodores and then he went solo, he put out some real success. And that, like I say, Can't Slow Down album in '83 was actually, he won Grammy of the Year. He beat out Prince, Purple Rain, Bruce, Born to Run, or whatever that album was that Bruce Springsteen put out. He beat out Tina Turner for that year. So I'm not saying I would like to get somebody that worked on that album as well. Still going to be a real tough task.
Hey, if you can get Lionel Richie up in, you know.
The producers, the writers, the people who played, it's a lot of people that goes into making an album. You know?
Jonathan, I'll never forget the very first interview you did. And I'll never forget there were naysayers. And Jonathan's first guest was
Curtis Robinson. All right. Well, with the Zoom operation.
And it's been uphill since.
Right.
So I would never ever put it. There's no one. If you say you're gonna get somebody,
yeah,
you've never not gotten somebody that you in the years and years and years of all the interviews you have done, and they are all here, by the way, on the network.
Gonna go out swinging. If I can't even get them all, I'm gonna go down.
Yeah,
swinging to the last
you
bat.
Know,
everything. Howard Baldwin. It took a couple years.
Howard Baldwin. You know, Howard Baldwin said you were the most persistent person he's ever met. And he was here, and it's more than just an interview. It's like you're inviting a friend of yours over for a conversation, and that's that's a testament to your ability to have conversations with people. It's conversational. Which is an outstanding quality, and I'm not just blowing smoke.
Right.
It's an outstanding quality, and it endears you to individuals who a lot of people think are unreachable. And there have been more than a few people who've come here, and off air they have told Jonathan that they will not do interviews with anyone else. And
well, truthfully, in this category, I'm going to need some help. I mean, anytime you're trying to get a producer for a major artist, it's very difficult just to go out on your own and get this person booked. Just like it takes some networking with other people to kind of, but that's still part of producing.
That's part of, I contend that you have within your black book. I can think of a couple people off the top of the dome that you can call sitting in that chair and be at least 1 to 2 people away from Lionel Richie.
Lionel Richie, right. Well, he's a very successful and songwriter too. You know, not just a producer. He just is not into music anymore. He's doing this type of show he's on, some type of judge show he's been doing of late. But again, I just remember that album, man, and I wasn't too much into him with the Commodores. I didn't think that was the right fit for him. That was like a funk band, and although he held his own. I think he did better when he went solo. But the Commodores was a good, successful music group too. But I know Sade is one of your favorite singers.
Oh yeah.
And definitely she stands out. Any other artists that one of your top artists that else beyond Sade that you?
My favorite people in music: Sade, Ronnie Song, and Jay Hogarth.
Oh, okay.
My list is very short.
Very short. Okay. The big artists. So the big name. Well, I mean, Ronnie and this other guy you just mentioned is real. He has a good sound to him as well. But I don't know if you like an R&B style. I don't know.
Whatever those 3 genres of music are is my style.
Is your style.
Yeah. Anything that Ronnie touches is gold, as far as I'm concerned. I can hear his signature in any piece of music.
Yeah, Ronnie Song. So he was a producer?
He's a producer. He plays instruments. He's an engineer. He writes. You'll hear him tell a story of writing string section for Frank Sinatra. I mean, he's a legitimate heavy hitter, but he's also a very humble and quiet kind of guy. So he doesn't make a lot of noise about the stuff he does, as a lot of these individuals are.
So like,
but
a low profile.
he can do anything in music. He can do movie score, jingle, hit record after hit record. I mean, that's what he does.
Yeah, Ronnie Song. Never met him. You had him on Morning Talk a couple years ago, Morning Talk Live, with the interview, but never really interviewed him, never really met him. And he's from Hartford, from what I believe. He's
Hartford guy.
Okay. I just can't remember him back in the day. So we just probably never ran in the same circle. So until you mentioned Ronnie Song about 10 plus years ago, I didn't even know who this person. I'm not putting that as a slap on him. I just never heard of him.
Well, you've heard his music.
I've heard his music probably. I just never put 2 and 2 together.
Right.
About Ronnie Song.
Most people are unfamiliar with the producers on songs, unless they're really heavy into the music and read the jacket, who does drums, who does percussion, who engineered the session. Some people are into all of that, and the audiophile, the real music cats.
Yeah.
But they know the music. They know the front person, the star.
Right.
Like the football. Like most people will know the quarterbacks, but they don't know the rest of the team.
Right.
They don't know the trainers, or some of the coaches. Like they might think that like Bill Belichick is the only coach, but there are a lot of other coaches.
Right.
So, there's a lot of people that contribute to the final product that people are unaware of. And so.
Well, see, that's my whole take about when you're making an album. It goes with a lot of different pieces and a lot of different people, from the sound, from the engineer to people who are playing the instruments, the songwriters, the producers, putting an album together takes although people like Prince can do it on his own, just about. I mean, he can do pretty much everything, but very rare can somebody do, an album just by themselves. They have to have like certain people to play instruments and other people that really put the sound together and put the album together.
Yeah. There are a few people like Prince.
Who can do everything.
Your boy down there in Atlanta. Movie.
Tyler Perry.
Tyler Perry.
Yeah, right.
There's very few people like Tyler Perry, Prince, who can do everything.
Well, you're capable of doing just about everything with your video camera. You can do the editing. You can do hosting a show.
Yeah, but I can't walk on water.
You can't walk on water. Okay. But you got like a jack of all trades.
No shortage of self-esteem here, right?
Okay. And anything? Any big news stories of late, locally or nationally that I can't think of any major stories.
There's no major stories. I'm smiling and somewhat chuckling because I'm looking at this post from my buddy Marcus.
Oh.
And so yeah.
The Marcus that I know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
There's only one Marcus.
There's only one Marcus, right.
Like one Cher, one Michael.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Exactly.
People whom you know by one name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, last week we didn't get a chance to talk after the William DeBella interview. He took up the whole time. I mean,
yeah. As a matter of fact, he stayed right up to the end. Left out of here with you.
Yeah, he did. I guess he had a lot to say.
And he had a doctor's appointment too.
He postponed it to an hour later.
Postponed the doctor's appointment.
Yeah, he had a lot to say last week.
Yeah,
about that. So that's still an ongoing issue, I believe. I don't think everything got resolved.
Well, nothing. No, I mean, they haven't had time for anything to be resolved. It's only been a week, 7 days. No, right. It's being resolved.
Well, that's good. That's good. You want to feel like something is moving in the right direction about that whole project and what they're trying to do. I mean, he's always going to paint the picture that nothing is MDC's fault.
Nothing's anybody's fault. No one takes blame. Very. It is an extraordinary human being or entity or agency or organization who steps up to the plate of blame.
Well, he stated
just no one does that.
Well, see, he's real clever. He stated last week that if something happens at the sewer, I guess from the sewer part, it's on MDC's fault.
As it is.
But if once it gets to your house or halfway or whatever, then it's no longer MDC's fault. And the whole problems that most of the residents and the businesses were having had nothing to do, according to him, with the sewer operation. He said they put their best effort out to try to respond to people. I still have some issues with that. But again, I was not at the second meeting. You were there. So do you really buy into MDC? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, controversial, but I know they're a great agency towards water and sewer operation. But their track record, man, has been kind of iffy. I mean,
it's a high visibility issues around the delivery of water, electricity, all utilities.
Right.
All of them. Internet, water, electricity, sewage, utilities that you need.
Right.
Anything that you need is going to be a level of, controversy and conversation as people are disappointed at the delivery of services.
Well,
it is what it is. But I think that a lot of times people don't understand the fullness of the operation. It's like they don't understand all that goes into making an album.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand all that goes into delivery of services. And when those services fail, what actually takes place to resolve those failures. Right. Whether it's a plane that falls out of the sky, it's not like Boeing is trying to kill people, but there are failures in the system. And those failures create what you see.
Well, I tell you, in the second half of March, I have a guest that we're going to talk about infrastructure development, but everything, water, sewer, gas, electric, oil, because I've never really done a show dealing with infrastructure development. And I don't know if you paid attention of late. I guess Operation Fuel, they're having some issues because the demand is so high in Connecticut that they kind of got a halt providing assistance to people for the month of March. And I've heard some people tell me that their electrical bills, Eversource, is sky high. So again, I don't know what determines how these rates can go up so higher than what they normally would be. But when you get into electric, gas, oil, water, I guess unless you're going to have a solar system, you really have to use one of those operations, right, Stan?
Unless you're off the grid, you need them.
You need them, right.
So they become public. They're public utilities. The public needs these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so where's the balance between profit that's made by these companies and service to the general public who's reliant on these things, and they're generally, controlled by, there's very little competition, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're stuck.
Right.
And so we have government that oversees these utilities and agencies to make sure that the services are delivered fairly priced, and that those that need the service but can't afford the service aren't cut off from the things that they need to keep them alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to strike a balance. Where is that balance? That's the ongoing, never-ending struggle and fight.
Now, again, by law, if you have electric and gas, they can't cut off your services during the winter month. You told me before that the oil, they don't have to refill your oil.
Oil, you have lots of choices with oil. Mm-hmm. And you have lots of options to provide heat to your house. Generally speaking, oil is used to heat your house or your hot water.
Right, that's what I mean. Right.
But, there's gas heat, electric heat, wood stove. There's lots of ways you can heat your house.
Uh-huh.
But electricity is an essential utility.
Yes.
Your oxygen machine can't run you don't have electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Water is essential. If your house doesn't have water, it can be condemned.
Right.
As unfit for human occupancy. So water is essential. Sewage is essential.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that are essential. Gas is a utility that, for the most part, it's essential. Internet has become essential.
Essential, right.
So, if there were 1,000 internet providers, it might not be classified as essential. I don't really know. Mm-hmm. But your expert will be here.
Yes, he'll be here the second half. So we'll get into everything towards that level and look forward to that. But, as we had Mayor Franklin on, she was talking about the high cost of housing in the city of Atlanta. And even when you look at our city here in Hartford, because I was thinking about this the other day, you could live someplace out in the boondocks, Bolton, Connecticut. One time I checked with a source, and you could have gotten a nice 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in Bolton, Connecticut for $800 a month. But Stan, I guess it's not hard to figure out why the rents, particular, but even housing in general, is so much lower the further you get away from the city, comparable to how high they become when you get into the city, because I guess the demand is just not there.
Well, generally speaking, when you move into the city, you're closer to a lot of the things that people want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
So the demand and supply changes because there's a high demand and a low supply.
Right.
So prices go up. So if you want to live around key things, you have to be prepared to pay a higher rent.
Right.
It's like rent in a store. If you want a storefront on Albany Avenue, across from the school over there by Shiloh Baptist Church, it's not going to be the same as, Main Street in West Hartford.
Right. Well, everything got to be taken into the equation. I mean, the quality, what it looks like. I mean, other than the fact that a landlord should provide the basic necessities, but if it's in a bad environment, if it's a lot of loud noise, a lot of negativity, that come with the territory, I guess, of a lower income area. Now, there's no excuse sometime, and you don't buy into excuses because you're poor. You have to be subjected to...
Poor is a state of money.
Yes.
Like rich is a state of money. Poverty, on the other hand, is different.
A little bit different, right?
So poor doesn't mean lesser than. It just means less money.
Yeah. But, I mean, that could mean less money to have what you're looking for or what you feel you need, too.
We running out of time, or we can have a whole show around our points of view on that subject. If you need more, then you have to do what's necessary to get more.
Right. And who is, I guess, the responsibility?
It's on the person that has the need.
Right. It's not favoritism or how the system is set up.
The system is basically set up to manage and monitor all of the things to make sure this stuff is fair. And government is there to make sure that the things that we commonly have need of are managed correctly. It's not set up to give somebody one thing and someone else something else. All right. In theory. Now, all of these systems can be manipulated and misused.
Yeah.
You got clergy molesting little boys.
Right.
The system's not set up for that.
No, it's not.
But if you get the right people in the right places, they can abuse the system to use it in ways that ought not be used. We get rid of the bad elements. I say that to say this. If someone has a need, then it's on them to do what they have to meet the need or exceed the need if they want more than they need. Some people will manipulate the system to get what they need.
Right.
As opposed to going out and getting 3 or 4 jobs to get what they need.
Yeah.
People take the path of least resistance. If manipulating the system will supply me what I need, then that's what people wind up doing. If you cut them off from that, they will do something else because they have a need.
A need, yes. And a need could become a want too. Just, I want more.
Wants, needs,
the same thing.
hopes, dreams, and aspirations. At the end of the day, they're all something you want. What are you willing to do to get it? Some people steal.
Right.
Because they have a need.
Well, Mayor Franklin, she did give both sides of the spectrum of her city, basically that you have some long history, structural issues. And you could say the same thing even here in Hartford. I mean, yes, people have to be able to do more, learn more, like she had mentioned, get more skills. If you're not making enough money because you can't get the type of job or you can't get the type of business that you want to have that's going to generate more money, then that's on you.
All right,
But if something is legitimately denying you, that they decide that they don't want to hire you, and they go with, I guess, a private business, you can't tell a private business who to hire. So that's part of the life of the game.
That's life in general.
Right. Now, if we don't have enough businesses in our city,
then you need to move to where business is.
Yeah. And it's that simple.
It is that simple.
So every poor person at the bottom can just pick up and leave.
No, they may not be able to just pick up and leave. They may not want to leave, Jonathan. One of the reasons there's black people in Connecticut is because folk migrated here.
Right.
What they needed wasn't where they were. What they needed, they couldn't get where they were.
Right.
So they left.
Right.
And went someplace that would help supply their needs. They needed a job. They needed work. It may not have been the kind of work they wanted, but it was work so that they could get the things they need.
Right. So sometimes we got to define what do a person really, if you want to have this or that,
Right.
You got to know how much money you need to earn. Obviously, that's common sense. And now homelessness and all of these other issues that's coming up.
Homelessness is usually an outward manifestation of a different problem. There are serious issues and problems around homelessness. Homelessness is an outward manifestation of a deeper dysfunction, whether it's a family dysfunction, whether it's mental health, whether it's being stuck in abject poverty. There are a lot of reasons that people are homeless.
Okay.
It isn't because they can't afford to get an apartment downtown Hartford.
Yeah. Well, even look at the new Westbrook Village housing. I mean, I thought.
Or Westbrook Village housing.
Yeah.
I mean, these are so what happens when those places are full?
But do you like that strategy, how they're developing Westbrook Village housing? They charge a market rate, or it don't matter to you?
It doesn't matter to me. I've not given it any thought.
But you've always been a fighter for the city residents. You always felt that we need to try to make the residents where they live at more beneficial towards what they're trying to bring to the city.
Right. Well, I mean, you know.
So if you torn down Westbrook Village, and I think it needed to be torn down. There's no dispute with that.
Right, but I would venture to say that everyone that used to live in Westbrook Village is living somewhere now.
Right.
They're not living on the street.
Okay. But they may not be able to afford to live in the new Westbrook.
It doesn't matter. They don't live. They're living somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Right? So everyone that moves into the new Westbrook will be people who maybe they used to live in Westbrook Village and now they're moving back.
Yeah.
You know, things come and go.
But you don't.
One thing is going is our time.
The time, yes. Time always flies when you're having fun. I'm getting into a good conversation.
Right. We just had a time jump.
A segment. But I still appreciate the show this morning that you gave me the opportunity to host and produce or co-host with Mayor Shirley Franklin. We'll do that. So.
All right. Well, we're out of time. I'll sit here talk to you till 11 o'clock with no problem. But, my friends, we are indeed out of time. So, we will see you next time. Special thanks to our guests. Thanks to Jonathan for inviting our guests. And, my friends, you have a great rest of your day. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.